What if the physical world is not reality itself, but it's an interface through which reality is experienced, and experienced in a way depending on the kind of observers we are? In this episode of The Mirror Point, we explore a radical possibility inspired by evolutionary theory, consciousness research, emergence, and philosophy that the world of colors, sound, textures, objects, and the physical forms may be more like a user interface than a direct view into the ultimate reality as it truly is. Yes, it's not very intuitive. We see colors, we feel things, we see things, smell things, experience colors, sounds, textures, shape. But is this fundamentally what reality is? Or is this just what reality is like to the kind of observers that we are? This is kind of what I want to talk about today. So, what do we mean by reality when we speak of such things? Well, here at the Mirror Point, we want to explore the possibility that sounds strange at first, but becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss once you start following it to its logical conclusions. What if the physical world is exactly what it appears to be, but just not what we think it is? What if colors, sound, solidity, all that stuff are not the ultimate structure of reality? What if this is just an evolutionary interface? What if physical reality is more like the desktop of a computer than the circuitry inside of it? And what is the possibility that helps explain why that's the case? And why, after centuries of scientific progress, a theory of everything remains frustratingly out of reach? Well, what is the physical? What do we really mean by that? Most people think they know what the physical world is. They say, hey, we see trees, we touch rocks, we hear music, taste the coffee, smell the rain. This is reality. But think carefully and a little bit deeper on that. Do you actually experience atoms? Do you experience quarks, fields, the wave functions? Do you experience space-time curvature? No. You experience it, but through an interface, like a perceptual interpretation. You experience it all as colors, sounds, sensations, textures, and qualities, right? This is the world of direct experience, perception. In fact, every scientific instrument ultimately terminates in that experience. A microscope image appears in consciousness. A graph appears in consciousness. A measurement always appears in consciousness, even mathematical equations. So scientists in science really gives us extraordinary, powerful models. But those models are not the same thing as reality itself. They're representations, maps, descriptions. And this conceptual distinction becomes very important, because perhaps what we call the physical world is already a representation. Consider your body. You are composed of roughly 30 trillion cells. Each cell is astonishingly sophisticated. The cells generate energy, repair tissue, build proteins. They communicate chemically, process information, respond to threats. Yet no individual cell understands what a human being is. A liver cell doesn't know what a wedding is, right? An immune cell doesn't understand astronomy. A single neuron doesn't understand the mirror point. The cells are just performing local tasks. Its perspective is radically limited for good reason. But those local tasks contribute to something vastly larger, the human being in this case. Now imagine trying to explain human civilization to a single cell. Obviously, its entire world consists of just chemical gradients, molecular interactions. How could it ever grasp the universe or Shakespeare, space travel, mathematics, the internet? It couldn't, because those things are out of its purview, not because those things aren't real. It's because natural evolution never selected the cell to understand them. There's no reason to. Evolution selected the cell to do its job, and that's all. Now let's scale upward a little bit. Think about an ant colony. Individual ants are intelligent enough to navigate, forage, communicate, and cooperate. Yet no single ant understands the colony as a whole. No ant processes a master blueprint, and no ant sees the full pattern. Yet when we look at colonies, colonies build cities, allocate labor, regulate temperature, adapt to environmental challenges. They solve complex problems. The colony exhibits intelligence beyond the individual ant. Again, nature didn't select the ant to understand the colony. Evolution selected the ant to perform local functions. The larger intelligence emerges weakly. Now, here's the uncomfortable question. What if humans occupy a single position? What if we are local participants inside a larger reality that we don't fully comprehend? Can you imagine if that was even possible, that we don't understand fundamental reality for what it truly is, and that we're sort of epistemically locked into a perceptual, subjective, first-person view of reality as an individual? Well, let's enter into Donald Hoffman's interface theory. Hoffman asked a radical question. Why should evolution select organisms to perceive reality accurately, fundamentally, and fully? Most people assume that accurate perception should equal survival. But Hoffman here argues otherwise. Using evolutionary game theory simulations, he found something very surprising. Organisms that perceive objective reality accurately are often outcompeted by organisms that perceive simplified, fitness-enhancing interfaces. In other words, natural selection favors survival, not truth. Think about your computer desktop. You know, when you see the icon, it's useful. It hides enormous complexity. The icon helps you interact successfully with your computer. But it is not the computer and all the ongoing code and transistors and currents and all of that stuff that makes it possible in the first place. It doesn't break that down. It doesn't encompass all of that information. It's too much. You could never send an email if you had to understand all of those things. It is just a useful shortcut. Hoffman's argument is that space-time and objects may function similarly. The world we perceive may be an adaptive interface, a user-friendly representation, not the ultimate structure of reality. And this is a profound idea, and it has implications that extend far beyond biology. Perhaps we're trying to explain the interface rather than the source. Imagine icons on a computer desktop trying to discover the circuitry generating them. The icon could map relationships among themselves forever, but the deeper level would remain hidden. Similarly, perhaps science has become increasingly successful at modeling relationships within the interface, while remaining uncertain about what generates that interface itself. And believe me, this is not a criticism of science. Science is extraordinarily successful. The question is whether its objects of study is ultimate reality or merely the structure of appearances. So we have a more non-dual possibility that we can entertain. Many non-dual traditions have always suggested for thousands of years among different cultures that what appears as a world of separate objects is not ultimate reality. The Advaita Vedanta speaks of Brahman. Certain forms of Buddhism speak of emptiness and dependent organization or origination. Mystics across various traditions report a dissolution of subject-object separation. What if these traditions were not rejecting the physical world? What if they were just saying that the physical world is real, but as appearance? But appearance is not the whole story. Similar to the computer icon analogy. The icon is real, it exists, you interact with it, but it's not fundamental. Likewise, the world of colors, sounds, objects, and bodies may be real, yet still not fundamental. So this leads to an unusual possibility. Maybe we can keep the word physical here and just redefine it. The physical is not a hidden world behind experience. The physical is the stable experience and appearance of reality. The world of colors, sounds, textures, shapes, distance, and objects. This is not an illusion. It is just the interface, a useful one, an evolutionarily successful interface, a lawful interface. So the cell cannot see the human, the ant cannot see the colony. Perhaps humanity cannot yet see the larger reality in which it participates. Not because the reality is supernatural, but because our perspective evolved for survival, not truth. Donald Hoffman is even partially correct. Then what we call the physical world may be less like reality itself and more like a user interface. Beautiful interface, useful interface, effective, but still in an interface. And if that's true, then perhaps the deepest question here is not what is the physical world made of, but what is the reality that the physical world is showing us? And that question remains open. I would be very interested to hear your thoughts, to read your thoughts, so leave comments in the comments section. Like and subscribe to the channel. If you like this sort of content, we're always talking about the deep stuff. Leave comments. Let me know, what do you think? Is the physical world more like an interface